chaka, hookah, 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 chaka, hookah, 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 chaka, hookah, 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 chaka, hookah, hookah.
I can't stop this feeling.
We're back, baby!
Deep inside of me. Girl,
Gambler,
you
you
just don't realize
what you do to me. A 3-month hiatus. We're past it. We are 32 days away from the start of the NFL season.
Let me know everything's alright.
Bacon Bets podcast has returned.
Hooked on a feeling. I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. Lips as sweet as candy.
We're back, baby. We're back and better than ever. The Bacon Bets podcast is here. I'm releasing this episode on Sunday, August the 4th, because I believe that is 32 days away from opening kickoff of the NFL season. So with it being 32 days out, I am, as I've done, at least this is my second year, if not my third year. Have I done this every year that I've done Road to 272? Regardless, I'm giving you, the people, my favorite futures bet for every single NFL team. 32 days until the NFL season, so let's give out 32 bets for all 32 NFL teams. Now, before we get into it, I am running a Survivor League this NFL season. The official Bacon Bets podcast, Survivor League. It is over at Splash Sports. It is. I'm limiting it to 300 entries, so sign up as soon as you can to make sure you secure one of those spots. It's a $25 buy-in. You get up to 3 entries with a grand prize. It's winner take all, $6,750 if we fill out the 300 spots. That is open as of today. So if you go to splashsports.com/baconbets, once again, splashsports.com/baconbets, and don't worry, I'll put the link in the description, both of the audio version of this podcast and of the YouTube version of this podcast, so you can just go click that. But make sure you go to splashsports.com/baconbets, the official Bacon Bets Survivor League, $25 buy-in. If you're not familiar with Survivor, I mean, the past couple years, I've given my Survivor pick out every week. You pick one team just to win. No bet, no point spread. You don't got to set lineups. One team every week. If the team you pick wins, you advance to the next week. Obviously, the trick is you can only pick each team once. So once you pick a team, you can't pick them again that season. And the final remaining person who survives wins $6,750 if we fill up the contest. So I limit it to 300 entries. So if you want to grab a spot, make sure that you do that ASAP. I know I ran a pool on Survivor, a golf pool, this season, and I know Canadians specifically couldn't join it. Survivor Canadians can join. So my fellow Canadians out there who are listeners, I got a ton of DMs of you guys who couldn't join the Majors golf pool this summer. You can join this one. Actually, pretty much no matter where you live in North America, you can join the Survivor pool. There's a few select states you're not going to be able to. You can't in Quebec, but if you're from Quebec, I don't want you anyways. Just kidding. Anywhere in Canada except for Quebec. New York, I actually can't sign up for it myself. I've been told from the people from Splash Sports they're going to be set to go in New York anytime here within the next couple of weeks, certainly before the start of the NFL season. So if you're in New York like I am at this moment, you should be able to join. I just don't think you can join just quite yet. I mean, even myself, I can't join quite yet because I'm in New York. I'm going back to Canada on vacation here this coming week, so I'll just sign up when I get back to Canada. But if you are in New York like me, I've been told, I don't have an exact date, I've been told you should be able to join within these next couple of weeks here. So yeah, 32 teams, 32 bets. Couple of quick life updates, by the way, because I haven't recorded an episode of this podcast since the Masters. I now write for Sports Illustrated. So, I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you probably know that by this point. But if you like any of my written work, and yes, for the Road to 272 Bets and for this podcast, 32 Bets for 32 Teams, the written versions of those podcasts, which is basically just my notes for the podcast, they will be in written form at Sports Illustrated, si.com/betting is where you can find all of my written work. Of course, I write more than just 272 and you know, there's 32 bets for 32 teams. I'm going to have a ton of NFL content throughout the NFL season. Obviously, I write a ton about golf. I'll be writing about hockey when we get back into hockey. So Yeah, it's all the same articles I used to write, except they're no longer on fan side of and bet side. They are now on Sports Illustrated, SI.com. Once again, this NFL season, obviously I'm doing the road to 272 bets. It'll be my 5th season doing it. If you're not familiar, there are 272 NFL games in a regular season. I place a bet on a side or total on all 272 of them. I've done it 4 years now, and I've finished profitable 3 of the 4 years, including last year. So I've done pretty well with those, so I'll be doing that again this year with episodes most likely releasing the same time as they did last year, which will be Tuesday morning. I usually record them right after Monday Night Football, and then, so it's ready to go. As soon as I wake up Tuesday, I already got all my picks in for next week. So keep an eye on that throughout the NFL season. That'll be, obviously, the next episode of this podcast will be that, and that'll come out the week when it's opening kickoff is the 5th, I believe. So that episode will probably come out the 2nd, or maybe the weekend before. I also last year, if you remember, before the season started, I planned on adding prop bets into the road to 272 bets. I couldn't end up doing that because prop bets aren't available when I lock in my bets and record Monday night. So I'm considering this year to do a second show each week. So instead of once a week, it'll be now 2 episodes a week. And the second episode will be prop bets only. I think what I'm going to do is a prop bet countdown where I just give you my 10 favorite prop bets ranked from my least favorite to my favorite of the 10 that I choose to play that week. So it'll be a little bit of a quicker episode with it just being 10 prop bets. The breakdowns probably will be a little bit quicker. And that I plan to be record Wednesday night, release Thursday morning. The reason why I'm not 100% locked in on that is because I'm one guy. When I record this podcast separate from my work as a writer and editor for Sports Illustrated. So I record it, I edit it, I publish it, I upload it, both audio and video, all that I just do by myself. I do it in my, spare time on Monday nights at, I usually get to bed at like 2 a.m. Do I want to do that now? It's a grind to do that for however many weeks in a row, all the way to the Super Bowl, from week 1 all the way to the Super Bowl. It's a grind to do that every single week. By the end of the football season, I'm exhausted. Do I then want to do a second episode on top of it? Kind of, but we'll kind of see how it goes. A couple weeks are going to be tough for me to do it because I got a couple weddings and stuff I got to go to throughout this football season, which will make it tough. But with all that being said, my plan is right now I'm going to do obviously the road to 272 once a week. My plan is to do a second episode of prop bets as well, which will get released weekly on Thursday. But I'm just saying, don't 100% hold me to that. There's a 5% chance I back out of that. But my plan is right now to do 2 episodes. And lastly, personal news. I don't know if I ever said that I was going to do this specifically or tweeted about it or what, but I'm running the New York Marathon this year. It's a journey I've started January 2023. I was 250 pounds. I was pretty significantly overweight. I was unhealthy. I hadn't done any type of sport or physical activity in years, pretty much ever since I, stopped playing college sports. So I got into running January 2023 with the short-term goal of just running a 5K race, and with a long-term goal of running the 2024 New York Marathon, which at that point was almost 2 years away. We are now approaching that. I ran enough in New York to qualify through their, I'm not going to get into it, but through the New York program, you run a certain amount of races, you volunteer at one, you get qualification to the next year's New York Marathon. I did that last year. I've been running. I've been slowly losing weight. But now I am, as of recording this podcast, 92 days away from the New York Marathon. So it's basically going to consume my life up until November 2nd when the marathon happens. So I'll probably give, bi-weekly updates about that because, I've been running the past year and a half to kind of prepare for it. I've done a handful of half marathons now. The marathon is a different beast. It truly keeps me up at night, every single night. I have fear of failing. And now for my official marathon training program that I got, that I've been following, started a few weeks ago. This is week 5. It's an 18-week program where I have 9 workouts a week I have to do between running and in the gym. I'm also on a very strict diet that I started about 5 weeks ago, and I've basically completely stopped drinking. And I have to follow that through all the way until the marathon. I'm going to have a couple drinks here and there, but basically once the football season starts, it'll be like 0 alcohol at all until the start of the marathon. So I'm going to be cranky. I already am. I'm 5 weeks into this, hardcore plan and diet, and I'm losing my mind. Losing weight, but also losing my mind. I don't know if anyone who listens to this is a runner. If you are, you can follow me on Strava. I post all my workouts and runs on there. I'm very not fast, but I do plan on completing this marathon and running the entire thing. My goal is to get under 5 hours. Is my light goal, which I think I should be able to do. My secondary goal is 4.5, which would be tough. So somewhere between 4.5, 5 hours is kind of the goal. Iain MacMillan, search me up on Strava, give me a follow, and I'll follow you back. I don't really know, the majority you probably don't care about it, but training for this marathon, it's obviously, it has taken over my life. It's cranked up here the past 5 weeks since I started the official marathon training program and this diet and the no drinking thing, but it's been something I've been slowly ramping up towards since January 2023. So that's going to be going on behind in my personal life while we get into the football season. And then November 3rd, the day after the marathon, I might just, start a food and drinking binge. That might kill me. So that'll be fun to follow along as well, because on this diet, I just have this constant dull sense of hunger that I feel 24/7. Trying to limit myself to like 1,500 calories a day. 2,000 if I burn a ton of calories for a big run that day, like I'll eat 2,000, but basically I'm eating very little to try to lose weight as quickly as possible before this marathon, and it's a dull hunger pain that I feel 24/7 that's slowly driving me insane. That's my life, baby. All right, 32 bets for 32 teams. I don't know how long this is going to take me to get through. It's a lot of teams. It's a lot of bets. Some teams, obviously, I'll talk about a little bit more than others, ones that I have strong opinions about. Yeah, but if you aren't aware, it's my favorite futures bet for every single team, and it can be anything. I have some bets that are like players, awards, a player on their team that I think is going to win an award this year. Some of it is, a bet on the team to win a division. A lot of team total wins, over-unders. Pretty much any type of futures bet related to any team. I've pointed out my favorite for every single one for all 32 teams. So we're going to go alphabetical order. So starting with the Arizona Cardinals and finishing with the Washington Commanders. So let's get into it. 32 bets for 32 teams. The 2024 NFL season is here. Let's get into it.
I'm not a state. I'm a monster.
No, Lisa. The only monster here is the gambling monster that has enslaved your mother. I call him Gamblor, and it's time to snatch your mother from his neon claws.
All right, let's get into it. Like I said, we're starting with the Arizona Cardinals. My favorite bet for the Arizona Cardinals for the 2024 season. We're starting off with an awards bet. Marvin Harrison Jr. to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Also, by the way, I've placed these bets. I'm following the same rule that I followed last year. To be fair, I'm not betting anything at offshore books. I'm strictly sticking to sports books, which are regulated in New York, just to try to keep things as as straightforward as possible. So I'm not citing some weird offshore book that nobody else has access to. And the 4 books that I use, I do believe Bet Rivers that I've used in the past. I think they might be shutting down in New York though. So I'm sticking to these 4. And this is the case both for this show and for the podcast moving forward, unless things change. FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Caesar. So every single bet I place this season, unless things change, I guess I could, I used to bet a little bit at PointsBet, which is now Fanatics Sportsbook, but I kind of hate Fanatics. I don't really want to support them. So let's stick to these 4 for the season, for at least for now. At least for this episode, every single pick I've locked in has been at one of these 4 sports books: FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, or Caesars. If you don't have an account at any of them, and I cite odds here that are at a sportsbook that you don't currently have an account at, go to the written article version of this podcast, click on one of my affiliate links in the intro paragraph to that sportsbook. That's going to help me out. That's going to make me look good to my bosses at Sports Illustrated when they see someone has clicked one of those affiliate links. But with that being said, if you live in the States, you probably have access to these books. These are kind of the four main ones: FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Caesars. As I go through, I will let you know which sportsbook I've placed each bet at because odds vary. This is why you should have sports accounts at as many different sportsbooks as you can. You got to find the best odds possible, especially some of the bets that I placed are on like a player, over under a certain stat this season, like over under passing yards. There are some significant differences between some different sports books that I saw of like over 200 yards. So with that being said, Marvin Harrison Jr. is my favorite bet to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, my favorite bet for the Arizona Cardinals. I bet him at plus 750 at FanDuel Sportsbook, or I should say he's available at plus 750 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm going to now rewind and say the only bets I placed at offshore sportsbooks, because I can't bet on them in New York, are awards bets. Because New York doesn't let you bet on awards. For some reason, it's a rule. So the awards bets I have placed at offshore sports books. I then looked at these four sports books and found the one with the best odds to then give to you guys. So if you are in a state where you can bet on awards, you can find Marvin Harrison Offensive Rookie of the Year at plus 750 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's remember with Offensive Rookie of the Year that it is not a quarterback award like NFL MVP obviously is. In fact, wide receivers have won this award in back-to-back years in 2021, 2022, Jamar Chase and Garrett Wilson, I believe. And a quarterback has only won this award 4 of the last 11 years. So don't be afraid to bet on a non-quarterback to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think that trend continues this year. Because Marvin Harrison Jr. is the only one of let's be honest, a running back's not going to win this award this year, so we're talking wide receivers, and then maybe Brock Bowers a tight end. But Marvin Harrison is the only one, in my opinion, that has the perfect mix of he's in a situation where, number one, he's going to be the main target, and number two, he's going to be playing for an already established, pretty good quarterback in Kyler Murray. I'm not going to say Kyler Murray's elite, but the other receivers, either, they're not going to be the number one target, or they're playing with a shitty quarterback. For example, Malik Neighbors of the Giants, he is going to be the number one target most likely for the Giants, but he has Daniel Jones throwing him the ball. Not good. Xavier Worthy of the Chiefs, he's the opposite. Obviously he has Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, throwing him the ball, but he's probably not going to be the number one option with Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown there. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is really the only one who checks both boxes. The only one, if you don't want to bet on him, and this is not my favorite bet for the Chargers, so I'm not going to give this out later, but Ladd McConkey could be an interesting case for the Chargers. Not confirmed if he's going to be the number one option, but that wide receiver room is wide open. Everyone kind of sucks on that team in terms of wide receiver. Quentin Johnston is clearly not the guy. I guess Josh Palmer might be the number one guy since he's like the best veteran. And then obviously he has Justin Herbert throwing him the ball. But so if you want a dark horse, I like Ladd McConkey, but my favorite bet to win Offensive Rookie of the Year is Marvin Harrison because he's the mix. He's the clear number one option in Arizona in the passing game. He has Kyler Murray throwing him the ball. I mean, you guys don't need me to convince you that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a great wide receiver in the NFL. He has clearly shown that he's elite. He showed that the past couple of years at Ohio State. Caleb Williams is the favorite to win this award at plus 140. I know that he has obviously a ton of weapons surrounding him. I have doubts about Caleb Williams. I'm not a college football guy, so it's, not a take I'm going to go out on a limb on. And if, you say to me that you think Caleb Williams is going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year and a great elite quarterback for the Bears, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't know. Is it a gut feeling? Am I an old man? And I just, I look at a guy who cries after he loses and paints his nails, and I'm just, this much of like an old man where I just refuse to think he's going to be an elite quarterback? Or is it maybe it's more so that the Bears are a cursed franchise who have never had a 4,000-yard passer, and just like the Falcons will never have a good pass rusher, the Bears are just doomed to never have a good quarterback. Maybe that's it. Maybe I just think the value is on Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe we'll go with that at plus 750, a lot more than Caleb Williams at plus 140. Listen, unless Caleb Williams gets off to a fantastic start at the very start of the year, you're probably going to be able to get better odds than plus 140 on Caleb Williams at some point this season, especially because with how many new pieces is in that Bears offense, it's going to take them a little while to kind of click and find their stride with each other, I think. So if you want to bet on Caleb Williams, I'd wait. If you want to bet an Offensive Rookie of the Year now, I think it has to be Marvin Harrison. I mean, the other weapons on the team, the receiving core is Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. I mean, they have a pretty good tight end now that they found in Trey McBride, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the number one guy, and Kyler Murray should be able to at least get him the ball. All right, moving on. We got to do this, unfortunately, because we are going alphabetical order. I hope this pick for my favorite team, the Atlanta Falcons, doesn't scare people away, because this is my hottest take of the entire season. We're getting it out of the way right here with the second pick. Stick around. I got a lot more reasonable bets coming up than this one. And there are a lot of different ways I can go with the Falcons. I could bet them to make the playoffs, but it's like minus what, 250? I could bet them to win the NFC South. I could, bet the over on their win total, which seems like a lock to me at 9.5, with the easiest schedule in the NFL. But I'm going bold. And I meant to have his jersey. I bought his jersey in the offseason. It's hanging up in my closet. I meant to have it out for the show. I forgot. Kirk Cousins to win NFL MVP at 40-1. Best price of the 4 sportsbooks I said that BetMGM Sportsbook, 40-1. Hear me out. Before you shut this podcast off, just hear me out. First of all, I'm now personally tied to Kirk Cousins. I recruited him personally. I don't know if you saw that. I made my pitch to him in January, then signed with the Falcons a month later. I take full responsibility for recruiting Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons. But just hear me out. Last year, when he got hurt for the Vikings in week 8, I believe it was. Yeah, he played 8 games for the Vikings before he was out for the season. When he got hurt 8 weeks into the season, he led the NFL in passing. That's a fact. He was averaging 291.4 passing yards per game. If he kept up that pace, he would have led the NFL in passing. At the time, 291.4 passing yards per game. That's 20 yards more per game than the eventual passing yards leader, Tua Tagovailoa. He also had a quarterback of 103.8. Only Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy finished with a better mark in quarterback rating. My point is, last season on the Vikings, before he got hurt, there is an argument to be made he was the best quarterback in the NFL, and at least on his way to being in the MVP conversation. Now he's on the Atlanta Falcons. His offensive coordinator with the Falcons is Zach Robinson, who played a big part in the passing attack that has been the Rams. The past few years, Cooper Kupp, Buka Nakua, Matt Stafford. He's kind of the main mind behind that passing attack. So he has a fantastic offensive coordinator who's going to know how to coach a passing attack. The Falcons have weapons. You got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. They have a top 5 offensive line, arguably a top 3 offensive line in the NFL. The Falcons offense has everything that it needs for Kirk Cousins to succeed this year. Now, should he be the MVP favorite? No. But if we're talking like you want a 40-1 dark horse on the guy who was leading the league in passing through week 8 last year and now is in an even better situation this year, if he can stay healthy, Kirk Cousins is set up to have an unbelievable season. On top of all of that, the Falcons have by far the easiest schedule in the NFL. If you look at combined or the average projected win total of each team's opponents, the Falcons have by far the easiest schedule in the NFL. So we got easy schedule. We got a passing attack guru as his offensive coordinator. We got a top 5, maybe top 3 offensive line. We got, some of the best weapons in the NFL with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. He is set up for some major success this season, and he's 40-1 to win NFL MVP. No one's going to be rooting harder for Kirk Cousins than I am this upcoming season, and I will support that with an MVP bet at 40-1. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to keep things pretty straightforward here. I know that I went with 2 back-to-back player awards bets. This one's a little bit more straightforward. I'm just going to take the Baltimore Ravens to win the AFC North plus 145 at DraftKings. They finished, I'm still very high on the Baltimore Ravens. There's an argument to be made about whether or not the roster is better this year than last year. I would say might be slightly worse. But last year's Ravens success, I know they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, but their record was not fraudulent by any means. Net yards per play, it's my favorite stat. I cite it ad nauseum throughout the NFL season. It's yards per play gained on offense, subtract yards given up per play on defense. The Ravens were 3rd in the NFL in net yards per play. They've added Derrick Henry to the backfield, who obviously is a little bit past his prime, but will still add a very dynamic kind of weapon to that backfield for the Ravens. And in my opinion, the only real competition for the Ravens in the AFC North is the Bengals. I think the Browns will take a significant step back this year. Their defense on the road last year was questionable. Like, they were like gave up the fewest yards per play at home, but the most on the road. Very weird. And the Steelers stink. Good luck to the Steelers with Arthur Smith this year, but more on the Steelers later. I think the Bengals are the only challenge for the Ravens this year. I do think the Ravens are the better team. The advantage in the Bengals' favor is they do have a much easier schedule, but still, I think the Ravens are a much more complete team than the Bengals. I have a lot of questions about the Bengals' defense. I still have a lot of questions about Zach Taylor, their coach. So a plus 145, I will take the Ravens to win the AFC North. Buffalo Bills. Once again, we're going to continue going here in alphabetical order. Buffalo Bills, I'm going with a player prop to go over a stat. Josh Allen, now this one's a little bit weird, but hear me out. Josh Allen over 485.5 rushing yards this season at minus 115, available at BetMGM Sportsbook. Josh Allen has gone over this total of 485.5 rushing yards in 5 of his 6 seasons as a starter in Buffalo. And now he doesn't have Stephon Diggs. He doesn't exactly have the receiving core he's had in years past. Obviously, he has Keon Coleman. He has, a couple of good tight ends in Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. But I think he's going to have to take off with his legs a little bit more this season. And we saw last year, he didn't run a ton early in the year. He ran a lot more later in the year, and it worked for the Bills offense. The Bills offense, finished their season pretty strong. So I think they're going to continue that game plan into 2024. And he has averaged throughout his career 38.4 rushing yards per game. If he hits that average in 2024 of 38.4 rushing yards per game, and if he plays all 17 games, he will total 652.8 rushing yards, which surpasses his set rushing total of almost 170 yards. So once again, if he just continues his career average of rushing yards per game and he plays in every game, he soars past his rushing total this year of 485.5. So Josh Allen over 485.5 rushing yards is my favorite bet for the Bills. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, and I'm sorry, Carolina Panthers fans, although I'm not because you're an NFC South rival, but I mean, you guys are so bad, I don't even like cheering against you guys at this point. Bryce Young under 3,200.5 passing yards. Bryce Young was terrible, which does not bode well after, CJ Stroud went number 2. You took Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud was like borderline MVP, won Offensive Rookie of the Year. You guys took Bryce Young and he sucked. He played in 16 games, threw for 2,877 yards. And now his passing yards total is 323 yards more than how many yards he threw last year. And that's if he stays healthy. I got a lot of questions about him staying healthy. He's small. And I know Kyler Murray's small too, but Bryce Young looked even smaller than Kyler Murray. Bryce Young looked like I cringe every time he gets hit kind of size. He doesn't seem to lack much confidence. I think he's going to fizzle out. This might be a hot take. I think even halfway through the season, he might get benched. Not benched for the whole season, but I could see he has a bad game, they just yank him. And it lasts a game or two until their backup eventually sucks too, and then they throw him back out to the end of the year. I don't think he's thrown for more yards than he threw for last year. I don't see him taking that significant of a step forward. I don't even know if he can stay healthy. I don't know if he can stay as the starter. I'm fading Bryce Young in a big way this season, taking under 3,200.5 passing yards as my best bet for the Panthers. The Chicago Bears. My bet for the Chicago Bears is for them to miss the playoffs. Minus 105. They're basically a pick'em to make the playoffs this season. I'm going to take them to miss the playoffs. A couple big things. Now, I do think the Bears are obviously a much better team this season. I think they will take a step forward. There are some things working against them, though, in my opinion. Number one, I don't think Matt Eberflus is a good head coach. I think he's out after this year. I thought they should have fired him after last season. I do think they're going to get off to a slow start to the season as well. I mean, yes, their offense has a lot of really good weapons, but all of those weapons outside of DJ Moore are new. DeAndre Swift, new. Caleb Williams, obviously new and a rookie. Keenan Allen, new. Those weapons are new guys, and it's very hard to have that many new faces get introduced to a new system while playing with their teammates for the first time. The Bears, in my opinion, I think get off to a slow start to their season, and you can't, well, I shouldn't say you can't, because, I mean, the Packers got off to a slow start last year and still managed to make the playoffs, but it's going to be hard to grab a wild card spot in the NFL, in the NFC, if you get off to a slow start, which brings me to my third and final point. I just don't think there's room for them in the playoffs. If you pencil in the wild card, the teams that are going to make a wild card, you got, one of whoever doesn't win the division, the NFC East between the Eagles and Cowboys, I think you pencil them in. I think whoever doesn't win the division, maybe not the Packers. The Lions are definitely going to make the playoffs. Even if you take, let's say the Packers don't make the playoffs, I think the Rams make the playoffs. And I wouldn't be surprised if whichever NFC South team that doesn't win the division can make a playoff spot. Yeah, either the Buccaneers or Saints. So it's just, I think it's a crowded room of teams who are going to be, kind of borderline wild card teams. And I think the Bears, because of their slow start, are going to be on the outside looking in. I think they're a year away from being a playoff team. So I'll bet on the Bears to miss the playoffs at minus 105. Bengals fans, I know I've gotten the reputation of being a bit of a Bengals hater the past couple of years. It's not, I don't have anything against the city of Cincinnati. I don't have anything against the Bengals as a team. I like Joe Burrow. I like the team. But when I got to place my money on some bets, I got to trust the numbers. And I truly think the Bengals are one of the most overvalued teams in the betting market. I'm taking them under 10.5 wins this season at plus 120. The bright side is the Bengals have a very easy schedule, one of the easier schedules in the AFC. So if I were to make an argument against my bet, it would be that their schedule is easy enough they're going to be able to do it. But I do want people to pump the brakes on the Bengals in terms of looking at them and saying, oh, Joe Burrow is healthy this year, they're going to return to being an elite team. Let's remember when Joe Burrow was healthy last year, he played in 10 games, the Bengals were 5-5. The Bengals finished 28th in the NFL in net yards per play last season. Their defense was absolutely atrocious. They gave up the most yards per play of all 32 teams on defense last year, giving up 6 yards per play. Even if Joe Burrow is healthy, I'm not convinced the Bengals have done enough on this team, especially defensively, to be competitive. Now, they could still go 10-7 and get a wild card spot. I'm not saying they're going to suck. But their win total's at 10.5, and the under is juiced to plus 120. I like that price tag on the Bengals to go under their win total. This is certainly not one of my favorite futures. I'm sorry, Bengals fans. I'm not trying to be a Bengals hater. If you guys come out this year and win 12 games and you're in the top 5 in net yards per play and the metrics hold up and Joe Burrow's in the MVP conversation, then I'll stand back and say, hey, great season. You guys deserve it. You're a great team, and I'll even root for you in the playoffs. At the end of the day, I got to trust the numbers, and things seem fishy to me about the Cincinnati Bengals. Under 10.5 wins at plus 120. Browns, we're going, by the way, that was at DraftKings. I don't know if I said that or not. Browns, I'm going back to a player prop, and I'm going to go with Amari Cooper over 925.5 receiving yards. Now, this does rely on, Deshaun Watson not being a complete bum this season. But if he can have a half-decent season, I think Amari Cooper, I'm going to make this a little bit shorter for video. There we go. To go over 925.5 receiving yards. In his 2 seasons in Cleveland, he recorded 1,160 and 1,250 receiving yards, both well over his set total for this year. He's reached at least 1,000 yards in all but 2 seasons in the NFL. Once was with the Raiders when they only played in 14 games, and the other was his final season with the Cowboys when he only played in 15 games, and CeeDee Lamb got the majority of targets. I know the Browns got Jerry Jeudy, but I don't know why sportsbooks just completely disrespect Amari Cooper this season. He has been one of the better receivers in the NFL for years to come. He's been very consistent. He's been one of the best receivers in years past. He's been very consistent throughout his career. And his receiving yards total is like 200 yards less than it was than what he reached each of the last 2 seasons. 325 yards less than what he got last year. Why? Do they expect him to fall off a cliff? Do they expect, Deshaun Watson to suck this year? I don't know what it is, but that was one of the player props that stuck out to me the most. So for the Browns, I like Cooper over 925.5 receiving yards. We're going to the Dallas Cowboys, and this is a bet I've placed now a couple of years in a row, and it continues to hit. And once again, it's at the same number that it's been at the past couple of years. And I actually saw a tweet, see if I can actually find it, that this is the most bet team total under. Why? Dallas Cowboys over 9.5 wins at minus 138. And that I bet that at FanDuel. Let me see if I can find this tweet again. Sorry, I should have had this already. I think it was... I think I saw 80% of the win total bets on the Cowboys were on the under. I don't know why I can never find tweets on Twitter. I don't know if it's just I'm an idiot, I'm not searching the right way, or if search just sucks. Yeah, I can't find it. Regardless, I'm pretty sure I saw a tweet that 80% of the bets on the Cowboys win total is on the under 9.5 wins. Why? Like I'm no Cowboys fan, and I know they choke in the playoffs, but this bet is not a bet on them to win the Super Bowl. This is a bet on them to reach 10 wins. They've reached 12 wins in 2 straight seasons. They've gone 12-5. They've never had a losing record in a season that Dak Prescott has played at least 6 games in. I know they did very little to improve their roster, which maybe, you know, where some of the doubt comes from, but also, like, they won the NFC East last year. It's not like they had to really, like, it's not like they had to improve or else they're going to regress in a major way this year. They did sign Eric Kendricks, which was a signing I liked, to help replace Leighton Vander Esch. But yeah, my point is, I mean, I think I've placed this bet the past 2 years, just the over on the Cowboys win total. I'm not a Cowboys guy, but, like, they're a very good regular season team. They can't reach 10 wins? They've gone 12-5 2 straight seasons. I think it's a pretty straightforward bet. I don't know why people are, you know, doubting the Cowboys this year. Are they going to win the Super Bowl? Probably not. They choke in the playoffs. Can they go at least 10-7? Absolutely. All right. Moving on to the Denver Broncos. Another over win total bet here. I actually kind of like the Broncos to go over their win total of 5.5 at plus money. Over 5.5 wins for the Denver Broncos, plus 105 at BetMGM. Not going to make the argument that they're going to be a good team in 2024, but I do think they're, you know, better than the market is evaluating them as. I think moving on from Russell Wilson was a smart move. It's hard to win games. You know, if you don't have a dominant defense, when your quarterback refuses to throw the ball further than 5 yards down the field, not going to be in contention for a playoff spot, but I do think, you know, fresh look at quarterback and Sean Payton can at least drag this team to 6 wins. We're looking for a 6-10 record from the Broncos, or I guess it would be 6-11. It doesn't even have to be 6-10. There's 17 games in the NFL season now. I don't know if you've heard. 6-11 to win plus 105. You can't get to 6 wins, Denver. Come on, get me 6. Get me 6 this season, Denver. Broncos over 5.5 wins. Detroit Lions. Lions. I think we're going to see some regression from Detroit this season. I'm going to go Lions under 10.5 wins at plus 110. They're kind of becoming the Bengals of the NFC to me because I like the city, the fans, I should say. I've never actually been to Detroit. I like the fans. I feel bad for them. I want them to win. If any team, if I could choose a team to win the Super Bowl next season, that's not my Falcons, it would be the Lions. But I got to trust numbers. I think the record was a little bit better than how they played last season. They finished 11th in the NFL in net yards per play. For example, that's below teams like the Falcons and the Vikings. Now they play a first place schedule. They also, you know, their division has gotten better. Chicago is certainly taking steps forward. Green Bay is going to be very tough. Even Minnesota, I know they have some question marks at quarterback, but they have a ton of weapons. They're going to be feisty this year. I think they finish 10-7. I still think they make the playoffs at 10-7. And you can bet that at plus money. 11 wins, I think. Not to say they can't, but everyone's kind of, penciling in the Lions as the NFC North winner and kind of, a Super Bowl contender this season. I'm not. Tougher schedule, tougher division. I don't want to say fraudulent. That's a bit of a strong word because they were a very good team last year, but I don't think they played as well as their record showed. I'm going to fade the Lions this year. I'm sorry. It brings me no joy to fade the Detroit Lions, but that's what I'm going to do this season. Now, if Lions fans didn't hate me before, they're going to hate me even more now. Because I'm taking my favorite bet for the Packers is for them to win the NFC North. Packers reclaim the NFC North crown, plus 230. I bet that over at Caesars. They have the best odds on the Packers to win the division. They were the youngest team in the NFL last season. They're now returning the majority of their roster. So I guess earlier when I said, was trying to figure out the wild card teams, and I said even if you put the Packers aside, no. The Lions would take one of those wild card spots away from the Bears because the Packers are going to win the NFC North. Youngest team in the NFL last season, they're returning the majority of the roster. They're adding Josh Jacobs, which I think is a plus in the backfield. They added Xavier McKinney, one of the most underrated signings of the offseason at safety. And as you tend to expect from young teams, they're only going to improve. You would think. They started last season slow, 3-6 last season. They caught fire. They won 6 of their final 8 games. They got an upset win over the Cowboys. Jordan Love is expected to take another step forward this season. I still actually do think the Lions should be favored to win the division, but I don't think they should be as favored as they are. I think the Packers Packers have a better chance of winning the NFC North than what plus 230 odds indicate. So that's why I'm going to take the Packers. I think the betting value is there on the Packers to win the NFC North plus 230. All right. This is kind of a strange player prop I have for the Houston Texans. I will say for the record, I do kind of think the Texans actually regress a little bit, but I didn't love the under on their team total. I actually think the betting market kind of suspects a little bit of regression from the Texans as well. So I'm going with the player prop. I'm going with Joe Mixon under 875.5 rushing yards. I know. That's a very strange kind of niche player prop them betting here. Joe Mixon under 875.5 rushing yards. But I do think that presents a ton of value. I'm not buying the hype on Joe Mixon. The Texans have made a lot of great acquisitions this offseason. I don't think Joe Mixon was necessarily one of them. He's never really been an impressive rusher of the football, in my opinion. He's a very good ball catcher out of the backfield. I actually think that's his biggest strength is as a receiving back. But his numbers haven't been impressive since his second season in the NFL. He hasn't had a season where he's averaged more than 4.1 yards per carry since his second season. He was the number 1 back in Cincinnati last season. Basically only him got the ball the large majority of the time, and he only managed 1,034 yards on the ground. Now he joins the Texans, who will not be giving him the ball every single time. The Texans got Dameon Pierce. The Texans got Cam Akers. The ball is going to get spread around a little bit more in Houston than what it was when he is in Cincinnati. And this total is only 125 yards fewer than what he got as the main back in Cincinnati. I'm not a Joe Mixon guy as a rusher. I think he's a lot better off as a third down receiving back. And I think by the end of the season, that might be the role he takes on in Houston. I think Dameon Pierce and Cam Akers are both better pure rushers. And then I think Mixon is a better receiving talent, but this bet is not on his receiving yards. It is rushing yards only. So I like this bet quite a bit. Joe Mixon under 875.5 rushing yards at minus 110. I did not put in my notes here which sportsbook that was at. So I'm sorry. Look around. I'm going to have to go fix that and add that in my article afterwards. So if you go check out the written version of this, hopefully I'll have it in by then, unless I forget, which is possible. But look at your sports books. You can find that number somewhere. Moving on. I don't know which team is a halfway. I think we still got a little while to go before we go halfway. This is going to be a long episode. I had to take a break and a breather at some point. So, alphabetically, what team do you think is halfway through? Don't know. I think we got a few more in front of us, though. Let's stick in the AFC South. Oddly enough, alphabetically, 3 AFC South teams are in a row: Houston, Indianapolis, and then Jacksonville. Kind of fun, right? I'm going with a player award for the Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to go Latu to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. He is my pick to win Defensive Rookie of the Year at plus 550 at DraftKings. I've been high on Latu since before the draft. If you remember, for the draft, I picked him to be the first defensive player drafted. That was a nice little payout. I forget what it was, 3-1, 4-1, to be the first defensive player drafted. He was. And the reason why I liked him to be the first defensive player drafted, the reason why I liked him to be the Defensive Rookie of the Year is because, and I think a lot of college, hardcore college football fans would agree, and I think scouts kind of said this as well, is that of the defensive rookies, of the defensive pass rushers, he's the most talented, the most skilled. There were questions about he had a major neck injury at, what school was it at first? Washington, and then they wouldn't even let him play because they thought his neck injury was that serious. So he transferred to UCLA. UCLA's doctors cleared him. He played. He got 12 sacks in 12 games with UCLA last year. And not only is he, in my opinion, the most skilled pass rusher of the rookie draft class, he's also going to be aided by the presence of Kwity Paye. That's how you pronounce his name for the Colts on the defensive line. So they already have an established guy on the defensive line. Other offensive lines are going to focus on Kwity Paye, double team him. That should open things up for Latu in the pass rush. So a lot of things working in his favor. And I think he's second on the odds list to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, plus 550. Lock it in for me, baby. Moving on, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm going to take them. This is kind of a similar bet on the Jaguars as my Packers bet was. I'm going to take them to win the AFC South at plus 285. So as I mentioned earlier, I expect the Texans to regress a little bit. How I'm going to attack that is not actually by fading directly the Texans. How I'm going to bet on them to regress is by betting the Jaguars to actually win the division. Now, once again, should the Texans be favored to win the division? Yes. They should not be like even money to win the division, which is basically what they are right now. Let's not forget, if the Jaguars didn't A, piss down their pants in the final 8 games of the season, and B, didn't lose to the fucking Titans in week 18, they would have won the AFC South. They lost to the Titans. That didn't hand the division to the Texans. But you're telling me the team that was in control of the AFC South all season long should have won it in week 18 is now almost 3-1 to win it this year? I'm not buying that. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's a little bit of recency bias based on the last few weeks of last season. The Jaguars are still a very talented team. We'll see if Trevor Lawrence can finally take a significant step forward this season. Christian Kirk, I think, is one of the more underrated teams in the NFL last season. Christian Kirk, one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. And don't forget the Texans' first place schedule. The Jaguars, obviously it sucks. They didn't win the division and they lost in the playoffs, but that's going to make their schedule a tad bit easier this season, which will be huge in terms of their, hopes of winning the division this year. So Texans should be favored. Almost 3-1 odds on the Jaguars is blasphemy in my opinion. So I'm going to take a shot on Jacksonville to win the AFC South at plus 285. So Kansas City Chiefs, who I've grown to hate if you listen to Stacking the Box, which is also going to be a 2-time-a-week show. If you want to hear, my non-betting takes about the NFL, tune into that. You've known that I've, my co-host Sterling Holmes, massive Chiefs guy, and I've, grown to hate the Chiefs because of just how arrogant their fans have become, which is crazy after years of sucking. They now act like their shit doesn't stink. I went into this planning on fading Travis Kelce. What ended up happening is I'm betting on Travis Kelce. Because I can't listen to my heart. I got to trust the numbers. I expected his receiving yards total to be overvalued because of just how public he is now. But I actually found the opposite. His receiving total is extremely low. So I'll take Travis Kelce over 830.5 receiving yards. That's at FanDuel, by the way, which I think is significantly lower than the rest of the sports books. Even if you think he's going to regress this year, which I do think he obviously will, he's getting older, he's clearly banged up. He's never had fewer than 830.5 receiving yards in a season. His rookie year, he played in one game. So outside of his rookie year, where he only played in one game, he's never had that only 830.5 receiving yards. Last year, he only played in 15 games, and he still got 984 receiving yards, over 150 yards more than his set total for this season. Odds makers must think he's going to fall off a cliff. I mean, the Chiefs still have an inexperienced receiving core. He's still going to be the safety blanket for Patrick Mahomes. My only concern would be his health. He played in 15 games last year. He's going to have to play in at least 15 games again this year to hit his total. But if he plays in 15 or more games, I think this is a shoo-in bet. Once again, I wanted to fade him. I did. I hate the Chiefs. They make me angry. I'm sick of seeing Travis Kelce, who I don't even think like is an entertaining personality. I'm kind of sick of him. I think he's kind of a douche. I'm sick of seeing his face all over the place. But I'm shocked seeing his receiving total is 830 yards. I'll take the over on that. I'll trust my heart. Okay, I think we're approaching halfway. So let's do one more, and then I'm gonna take a quick break so I can have a drink of water, and then we'll get back into it. Let's go with the Raiders. The Raiders, my best bet. I'm doing this with a few different teams this season, which kind of scares me. There's teams that are, like a lot of people are saying, are bad that I just don't think are going to be quite as bad as people think. And the Raiders are one of them. I'm going to take the Raiders over their win total. Their win total is set at 6.5. I'll go over 6.5 wins, minus 130. That's a DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's remember Antonio Pierce went 5-4 as the interim coach, so he had a winning record with him when he took over last season. Is he going to have a winning record overall this season? Probably not, but I am kind of fascinated to see how Antonio Pierce does this year. Defensively, they're actually pretty solid last year, 11th in the NFL in opponent yards per play. And also, the Raiders made what might have been my favorite acquisition of the offseason, which was they signed Christian Wilkins. So their defensive line, Christian Wilkins with Max Crosby, on a defense that was already an above-average, borderline good unit last season. Raiders defense might sneakily be extremely good this season. At the very least, their pass rush is going to be scary. Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby. Whoo! Also, that Texas... what happened to the Texas Tech guy they drafted last year? Tyree something? Raiders, Tyree... Is it Tyree Wilson? What happened to him? I think he was my pick to win Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, and he sucked. I don't even remember hearing about him. My point is, if he steps up, look, that three-headed monster would be nice. And then their quarterback's probably going to be Gardner Minshew. It might be the other doofus, but I'm going to assume it's going to be Gardner Minshew, who, let's not forget, who was it of the Colts? It was like their third-string running back dropped a wide-open pass on 4th down in Week 18 of the Texans. We didn't know it at the time. We knew that game was for a playoff spot. But that wide-open pass gets caught, the pass from Gardner Minshew to that third-string running back, and they beat the Texans. They win the AFC South. People forget that. He catches that ball, they win the AFC South because the Jaguars end up losing the next day to the Titans. And that's Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew dragged a not great Colts team to that spot. So Gardner Minshew is going to be a guy who can drag a bad team to more wins than they deserve. And we're not asking for a lot for the Raiders. We're not asking them to have a winning record or make the playoffs. We're asking them to go 7-10, which I think they can do. I'll take Raiders over 6.5 wins. All right, let's take a quick break. My guess is alphabetically Raiders are team 16. I'm going to count when I take a break and see if I was able to nail it halfway through the teams. But regardless, this is going to be the halfway point anyways. Going to take a quick break, and I'll be back to give out my picks for the rest of the 32 NFL teams. And welcome back. The Raiders are 17th team alphabetically, so I did one too many. I almost nailed it just based off the eye test and my guess. So the Chiefs, after the Chiefs, would have been the natural halfway point, but really, at the end of the day, who fucking cares? So we are through 17 teams. That means that we have 15 teams left to go. And just a little update while I had that break there. I checked. I remember earlier I gave you Joe Mixon under 875.5 rushing yards. I did not have the sports book in my notes. I went and checked. I don't know if I just didn't do my due diligence and didn't check the 4 sports books when I made that bet for some reason. Or the odds have changed because I wrote my notes in the article a few days ago. But Joe Mixon under 850.5 is at DraftKings Sportsbook at even money. So go bet it to DraftKings. That's going to be the best bet. For my personal record, obviously, I'll stick with what I bet, which was under 875.5. But at DraftKings, he's under 850.5, 25 yards less, and also you're getting plus money. So there you go. So let's move on. We just finished with the Raiders. That means we are moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers. And I am going to take Chargers to make the playoffs this season. This is a little bit of a polarizing bet. Some people are very high on the Chargers this season. Some people are very low. I will admit there's kind of a bit of an issue with the Chargers where it feels like every single year the past handful of years, people expect them to be a dark horse, and they have failed to live up to that more often than not. The only year they made the playoffs, they blew a massive lead to the Jaguars, because the Chargers, and I've always said this, I felt this almost my entire life, the Chargers are the Falcons of the AFC. I don't need to say more. Talented a lot of times, all-time heartbreaking losses by the Chargers. If you look at heartbreaking losses, it's the Chargers, it's the Falcons. I used to cheer for the Chargers quite a bit when they had LaDainian Tomlinson. I don't know why I went on that tangent, because they blew the playoff lead to the Jaguars a couple years ago in very Chargers fashion. This year, going to bet on them plus 112 at FanDuel to return to the playoffs. A couple things. Number one, I actually think they did a great job of just getting rid of the old guard and moving on. Obviously, they fired their head coach. But not only that, they moved on from Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. They got a brand new, fresh start, which I absolutely love for them. They had to do it. It's a smart move. And I love their first two draft picks. Joe Alt, it was a great pick by them. In my opinion, he was the most can't-miss prospect in the draft. Offensive tackle, obviously, offensive line in general, not a sexy pick. Not one that a lot of people are going to get excited about. Probably not a lot of Joe Alt jerseys being bought. But, I mean, you're going to protect Justin Herbert and Joe Alt, in my opinion. Once again, I'm not an official scout. I'm not a big college football guy. But from everything I read and, have read from people I do trust, he's a high floor, high ceiling guy. But then you still managed to get Ladd McConkey, who I think was one of the better receiving prospects. Now, there's some questions about his health this season, but I think he's one of the better receiving prospects in the draft. You're able to get Ladd McConkey early in the second round. And then obviously you got Jim Harbaugh. Now, there's questions about Jim Harbaugh, whether or not he's going to be able to be a good coach 3-4 years down the road. There's some rumors, when he was in San Francisco, players just kind of got mad, well, not mad, I'm sick of him. Because coaching college and coaching NFL is two very different things, and he screams to me much more of a college coach, not necessarily in terms of game planning, style, playbook, things like that, but it's more so how you treat your athletes. In college, you have to kind of be a little bit more of a parent to these guys who are, fresh out of high school, probably living on their, on their own for the first time. You can and should and can get away with being a lot more strict, acting a little bit more like a parent, where in the NFL, you have to look at your players a little bit more like equals. You have to kind of trust them a little bit more to not get crazy. You have to, give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit more. And I just don't know. I feel like Jim Harbaugh still talks to his players like they're university students or college students. But the first couple of years on the Chargers, he's going to get the most out of his team. He's still a very, very capable coach in terms of game planning, strategy, all those types of things. And I think for at least the first couple of years, he's going to get the most out of his team. So I think the Chargers are going to be in the mix for a playoff seed. And also, the most important reason why I like them to make the playoffs this year, they have the second easiest schedule in the NFL based on opponent projected win totals. The Falcons have the easiest, the Chargers have the second easiest or first easiest in the AFC, which is absolutely massive when it comes to making the playoffs as a wild card. So I don't think they're going to win the AFC West. I'll pencil them into a wild card spot. Give me the Chargers to make the playoffs at plus 112. Speaking of making the playoffs, speaking of a Los Angeles team, speaking of plus money, give me the Rams to make the playoffs, plus 106 at FanDuel. By the way, Chargers was also at FanDuel. Rams made the playoffs last season. They're arguably the hottest team in the second half of the season. Let's not forget the Rams went 7-1 in their final 8 games. Their only loss in that stretch was to the Ravens, and it came in overtime. They almost beat the Ravens. Very, very, very good team. They made a few key acquisitions. They signed Jonah Jackson to help with the offensive line, which was huge. They added their secondary. They got Tre'Davious White and Darius Williams. So they added, maybe not the sexiest signings of all time, but some really good depth pieces that's going to help this team. Obviously, they lost Aaron Donald, but they're still, I think, in a very good spot to make a playoff spot in the NFC. Also, they lost Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator, to the Falcons, which could be tough for them. But I mean, they're returning, a good portion of their team. They're the hottest team in the NFL. They started off slow last season, finished as one of the hotter teams in the NFL, and they still have, arguably one of the most dynamic passing attacks in the NFL. Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. I think people are overvaluing the loss of Aaron Donald a little bit. Yes, he's arguably the greatest defensive tackle of all time, but he did regress at least a little bit last season. I'm still going to hurt them for sure, but it's not like I'm going to now bet against the Rams because they lost Aaron Donald. Still plus money to make the playoffs this season. I think they're, the definition of a wild card team. I think they finished second in the NFC West to make the wild card, make the playoffs as a wild card. For the second straight season, I'll bet on it at plus 106. Now, the Miami Dolphins, there was a pick I gave out, which I'm not doing on this show, but I wrote an article about it at Sports Illustrated. I also did a video, which you might have seen on my social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, at Iain MacBets. That was Tua Tagovailoa over 4,500 passing yards, which is crazy. Last year's passing leader threw for over 4,600 yards. This year's passing yards total at FanDuel was 4,000, like 600 yards fewer. Crazy. But for this podcast, I'm going to go Dolphins over 9.5 wins. I'm very high on the Dolphins this year. I think the market's undervaluing them. I think they have a little bit of an issue where, and this might have caused the Tua's numbers for his passing yards total as well. I think when people think of the Dolphins right now, let's do this test. You the listener, when I say the Miami Dolphins, what do you think of? And I think the first thought that would come to your mind is their playoff game against the Chiefs when they played in freezing temperatures and they looked like shit. They were terrible, but we're not talking about the wild card round of last year's playoffs. Or you might think that they blew the AFC East to the Bills in week 18. No, this is a bet on the full season from week 1 to week 18. And when you look at them last season, they were one of the better teams in the NFL in the regular season. They just simply were. They were second in the NFL in net yards per play. The 49ers were first. The Miami Dolphins were second in net yards per play. That's a fact. They have the most explosive offense in the NFL. That's a fact. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua Tagovailoa, Davon A-Chain, who's unbelievable. He averaged, I know he was hurt, for a decent amount, but he averaged like 5.6 yards per carry or something bananas last season. Raheem Mostert still, much more of a, an every down back. The Dolphins are a dangerous team. And then they added to their defense. They signed Calais Campbell, who's a very good veteran to have in their defensive line. Kendall Fuller, cornerback. Jordan Poyer, safety. Their defense was, needed some improvement. They got that improvement with some nice depth pieces. And now they have the 8th easiest schedule in the NFL based on opponent projected win totals. What's there not to like about the Dolphins? The only argument you can tell me about the Dolphins is that they suck when it gets cold, which sure, they certainly might. Good thing the first 13 weeks of the season are in nice weather then. Am I going to bet on them to win the Super Bowl? Probably not, especially if they got to travel back to Kansas City in January again. 9.5 wins? You're telling me the most explosive offense, the team who finished second net yards per play, the team who has the 8th easiest schedule in the NFL, can't go 10-7? This might be my favorite win total bet. Dolphins over 9.5 wins, minus 122 at FanDuel. This one's a little bit of an interesting one for the Vikings. Now, hear me out with this one. I did earlier say that the Vikings are going to be a little bit feisty, but my actual favorite bet for them, and it's because of how their schedule works out, is to be the last remaining winless team at 11-1. A little bit of a long shot bet, probably not going to hit. I don't know how I can make this kind of fit in my graphic here. Let's just you heard that I said Vikings, then I can delete that. Last remaining winless team at 11-1. Vikings fans, don't get mad at me. Just go ahead and look at your team schedule and you'll kind of see where I'm coming from here, because we're talking about a long shot. This is not, a bet I'm super confident in, but one I think that's, worth some value at 11-1. Week 1, they have a very winnable game against the Giants. No doubt about that. Let me actually quickly look to see if I can find their odds for Week 1. I bet you they might even be favored. I don't remember where that game is. Vikings. Oh, that's preseason. Perfect. So now I'm on a sports book that's going to show me a bunch of preseason lines. Can I get regular season lines, please? Here it is. Vikings are at New York. They're 1-point underdogs. So extremely winnable game. Basically pick them against the Giants in week 1. But if they lose that game, the Vikings then play their next 6 games are as follows. The 49ers, the Texans, at the Packers, Jets, Lions, at the Rams. Even if you want to go further than that, you got then Colts and the Jaguars. So their next 8 games after the Giants in week 1, they will be underdogs. That's 49ers, Texans, Packers, Jets, Lions, Rams, all playoff teams from last year. All 6 of those, well, not the Jets. Jets weren't a playoff team last year. 5 of those 6 teams are playoff teams. Jets are expected to be a playoff team this year. And then you got the Colts and the Jaguars. Round out from weeks 2 to 9. Probably 2 to 10 because they probably have a bye week in there. My point is, if they lose to the Giants, it might be a while until they get their first win. Now, the rest of their season gets easier. They then play the Titans, they play the Cardinals, they play the Seahawks, they play 2 against the Bears. The second half of their schedule, significantly easier than their first half. If they lose to the Giants in week 1, they might be the last team to get a win, and you can bet on them to be the last team to get a win at 11-1. I like that bet quite a bit. That's at FanDuel. No bet brings me more joy to give you this season, my friends, than the one I'm going to give you right now. We lived through 20 years of the New England Patriots dominating the NFL. Of every single year, we could just pencil in the Patriots in the AFC Championship, and in more years than not, pencil them in the Super Bowl. I've dreamed during those years. I dreamed of the day that the Patriots would no longer be good, that they'd be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Well, it's here, my friends. The Patriots are the betting favorite to have the worst regular season record. And I'm going to bet on them as the favorites. Plus 350 at FanDuel. Because it'll give me a reason to cheer against the Patriots week in and week out. I'm sorry, Boston fans. Actually, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not sorry. You just won another championship with the Celtics. Experience having a bad team. For once, if you're my age, you probably have never had to cheer for a bad team. Have you? Have the Bruins or Celtics ever been like a bottom 5 team in the past 30 years? I guess the Patriots in the early 90s maybe. But let's date back to 2000. Has Boston sports fans ever... I guess the Red Sox have had some bad years, but still. Those are sandwiched in between World Series winning years. Fuck you, Boston fans. You know what, Boston fans? You know what I want from you, Boston fans? Sit down and watch every single Patriots game from start to finish this season. That's what I'm asking you to do, Boston fans. You have had 25 years of dominance in every sport. You just watched your Celtics win another NBA championship. It's only fair for you to sit your ass on the couch and watch from start to finish your New England Patriots suck this season. Do it. It's only fair. The rest of us have to watch shitty teams almost every single year. For once in your godforsaken lives, sit down and watch your shitty team get their ass kicked. Please. And I know that's not going to happen. I know you shitty Boston fans you're hardly going to watch the Patriots this year. You're going to say, yeah, football's dumb. Who cares about football? It's almost NBA season. It's almost hockey season. It's still baseball season. Red Sox are hot. No. I'm asking you, please, sit down and watch your shitty Patriots every Sunday this season. Because they're going to suck. And it's going to bring a smile on my face. Every week. I'll bet on them to have the worst regular season record at FanDuel at plus 350. Moving on to the Saints. I mean, the team I hate, the second most behind the Patriots. I know it's weird for me as a Falcons fan, but I have a very specific situation, so I do actually hate the Patriots more than the Saints, which is probably blasphemy for me to say, but Saints are definitely my, second least favorite team, under 7.5 wins. I actually, my objective brain bought in on the Saints last season in terms of just, the betting part of my brain. Obviously, the Falcons fan part of me knew they were going to suck. But when you looked at their team on paper, you're like, oh, shit, they actually looked pretty decent. I thought they were going to win the NFC South last year. They weren't. 19th in the NFL in net yards per play. They're actually even worse than the record indicates. The Saints will never be good again until Dennis Allen's not their head coach. I think he's a terrible head coach. Derek Carr is, his numbers look good, but I just can't win games. I'm out on Derek Carr too. I'm out on the offense. I'm out on their defense. I'm out on their head coach. I'll go under 7.5 wins for the Aints. Even money at Caesars. Another under bet. I'm going under 6.5 wins at -130 for the New York Giants. Giants went 6-11 last season, and they were actually kind of lucky, in my opinion, to go 6-11. Their win total's at 6.5, so they would have to have a better record this upcoming season than they had last season. I don't see it. They finished dead last in the NFL in net yards per play. You know that I'm a slave to net yards per play. Net yards per play hasn't let me down. I've been profitable betting on every single game 3 of the last 4 years. A big reason for that is because I rely on net yards per play. They, a lot of the time, tell a different story than what records and public narrative has about teams. I believe in net yards per play, and they were dead last in net yards per play last season. They're lucky to get 6 wins. Sure, they might get 6 wins again this year. They're not getting 7. Giants under 6.5 wins. Another under bet for another New York team. Now this one I kind of gave out as well. I made a video about this. I wrote an article about it. It's about the New York Jets. I'm going under 9.5 wins at +125. Someone posted my Sports Illustrated article about this over on the Jets subreddit on Reddit, and I expected the comments just to be tearing me apart. It was actually kind of funny that the majority of the comments were like, yeah, we haven't done anything. The majority of the comments actually kind of agreed with me, which actually, made Jets fans endearing to me because they're such a tortured franchise. This is supposed to be their year, and a lot of them are still like, yeah, we'll fuck it up somehow, which is hilarious to me. I can relate. There were obviously some people ripping on me for here's an issue with kind of sports media and kind of being in sports media and writing articles, is that people expect you to have like a 5,000 word essay, and if you don't have a 5,000 word essay, they're like, this guy doesn't know anything. Listen, I could sit down and write 5,000 words about why I don't believe in the New York Jets this year. I don't think my boss would like that I took an entire week to write a 5,000 word article instead of multiple, smaller articles, so I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, I don't believe in the Jets. And it does come down to, which, is what the article was mainly about. It's what, the video I made was mainly about, is I just don't think Aaron Rodgers can do it. This team won 7 games last year. They went 7-10 last year. For them to hit the over on their win total, they'd have to go from 7-10 to 10-7, and I don't think they can do it. Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. He's coming off a torn Achilles. 2 years ago, the last year is healthy, was his worst statistical season ever when he was with the Green Bay Packers. Maybe he's always been like this, but his mind, in my opinion, is not on football right now. His mind is, I don't know if you guys listened to the Pardon My Take interview with him last week, a couple weeks ago. It was weird. At one point, it got brought up in World War II, and he was like, are you sure we were the good guys in World War II? I can say pretty confidently it's not the Nazis, Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers is a liberal arts student who discovered weed for the first time, but yet he's 40 years old and he's NFL quarterback. He's just like, oh yeah, I don't know about the main narrative about that, man. Have you ever just actually thought about it before? If you just actually think about it, dude, it's actually kind of crazy. It's to me extremely cringe for a 40-year-old NFL quarterback to talk like he's a liberal arts student. Who discovered weed for the first time. So yeah, I'm out on Aaron Rodgers. Now, if his last healthy season he won MVP, I'd be in on him, sure, but 3 years ago, he won MVP. 2 years ago, he was bad. Last year, he was hurt. He's 40 years old. The Jets are just kind of a cursed franchise. Yes, they have improved their offensive line. I obviously know that. It is a little bit of an unproven offensive line, though. It's a little bit of an offensive line that has had injury issues themselves in the past. And if Aaron Rodgers goes down, can they win 10 games? Who's the backup? They couldn't find anyone to win them in any games last year, no matter who they tried. Tyrod Taylor. Can Tyrod Taylor lead them to a 10-7 record? I don't think so. I'm out on the Jets. I'm out on Aaron Rodgers. They are my pick as the most fraudulent team in the NFL heading into this season. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm sticking to it. All right, the Eagles. Now, this bet would have been a lot better if you would have placed it like 2 months ago when you could get that plus money. You can't get plus money on this bet anymore, but I'm just going to take them to win the NFC East at -110 at DraftKings. I know I took the over on the Cowboys win total, but is that 9.5? I think that's a pretty easy over, but I still think the Eagles win the NFC East. I think it's easy to judge the Eagles based on their late season implosion last year, but they have new coordinators. I love Kellen Moore, their new offensive coordinator. They have the 9th easiest schedule in the NFL based on opponent projected win totals. They addressed their secondary in a big way. They brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They got Quinyon Mitchell. I think that was the corner they got, plus Cooper DeJean. It was Quinyon Mitchell, right? Terrion Arnold went to the Lions. Quinyon Mitchell went to the Eagles, right? Yeah. So they got, in the draft, they got, arguably the top cornerback, and then arguably like the number 3 or 4 cornerback. So their secondary, which was their biggest weakness last year, has been addressed. New offensive coordinator. Listen, they have too much talent. They have too much skill. I'll take them to win the NFC East at -110. And now, obviously, because they lost the NFC East last year at the very end, kind of a similar thing as the Jaguars. Yes, it sucks that they lost the division, but now their schedule is going to be at least a tad bit easier compared to the Cowboys because they'll be playing a second-place schedule instead of a first-place schedule. Steelers. Now, I could shit on the Steelers here, which I do like to do quite a bit. But I'm actually not. This is actually a pro Steelers bet. Steelers fans will be happy to know. If I can actually copy this over here. It is a player award, because if I was betting anything team-related, it would not be good. They have Arthur Smith, who, hey, listen, nobody knows Arthur Smith more than Falcons fans. Your guys' offense is going to be tough to watch this season. You have Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Let's say it's Russell Wilson who's supposed to be the starter with Arthur Smith. So you have Arthur Smith who runs jet sweeps to backup tight ends, and you have Russell Wilson who refuses to throw the ball 5 yards down the field. It's going to be a rough offense to watch. That is why I'll take TJ Watt to win Defensive Player of the Year. Can someone explain to me why Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year and why everyone is like that was just the obvious pick? Not really many people argued that Myles Garrett shouldn't have won Defensive Player of the Year. Am I missing something? Because when you look at the defensive stats from last year, TJ Watt had way better stats than Myles Garrett. Am I being too much of a stats bitch? Did Myles Garrett pass some eye test that I'm not aware of? He was a sack leader, TJ Watt was. 19 sacks, 1.5 more than the second most in the NFL. He had 5 more sacks than Myles Garrett. He also had 19 tackles for a loss, 8 pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles. In my opinion, TJ Watt was by far the best defensive player in the NFL last year, but everyone is just yeah, it was Myles Garrett. Why? Can someone literally DM me on Twitter and explain to me why Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year? Because no one else seems to be arguing this except for me. To me, TJ Watt was by far the Defensive Player of the Year. So I'll bet on him to be the Defensive Player of the Year this year at plus 750 odds. Moving on, we got the San Francisco 49ers. You can bet on the 49ers, full disclosure, are my pick to win the Super Bowl this year. But I'm not just going to bet on them to win the Super Bowl because once you get to the playoffs, anything could happen. I mean, they almost lost to both. Who they play in the divisional round? Was it the Bucks? No, the Packers. I think it was the Packers, right? Yeah, the Bucks played the Lions. The Packers almost beat them in the divisional round, and the Lions almost beat them in the conference championship. Anything could happen in the single game. So I actually think the best way to bet on the 49ers is them to get the number 1 seed in the NFC, 3-1. That takes the playoffs out of the equation. The 49ers, in my opinion, were the best team in the NFL last year. First in net yards per play. They actually don't even have that tough of a schedule this year. 15th toughest schedule, so middle of the pack in terms of schedule difficulty. I'm a big Brock Purdy believer. I like their offense. We'll see what happens with Brandon Ayuk. Their defense, I'm glad they fired their defensive coordinator. I thought he was actually a big issue for them last year. Their defense actually was kind of average at best. So hopefully they're going to improve on defense. Their offense will keep rolling, and I think they just end up being the number 1 seed in the NFC again. I think the only team that can really challenge them is like the Eagles, maybe the Cowboys, maybe my Falcons, but still. 49ers are the best team in the NFC. If they stay healthy, I think they get the number 1 seed at 3-1 odds. Seahawks, I had a lot of issues with the Seahawks in terms of trying to decide what way I wanted to go with them in terms of my future bet. I ended up settling on a player prop. And FanDuel specifically had a bad number on it. Now, before I tell you what it is, let me just double check to make sure these odds haven't changed since I locked in this bet a few days ago. But it is, I guess I'll just tell you now. It is DK Metcalf to have over 950.5 receiving yards. So he needs 951 receiving yards for this to win. And DK Metcalf still at this number at FanDuel. That is 50 yards. No other sports book I could find had DK Metcalf's receiving total at less than 1,000 yards. FanDuel is 50 yards lower than any other sports book. So this is taking advantage of what I think is a bad line set by FanDuel. He's gone over this receiving yards total in 4 straight seasons. So he's, cruised over this receiving yards total every year, or at least in 4 straight seasons. Tyler Lockett's getting up there in age a little bit. He's 31, I believe. So I think we're going to see Metcalf start to take kind of the bulk of the targets moving forward. And no matter if it's Geno Smith or Sam Howell, even though some of those quarterbacks, their issue is not a Russell Wilson issue where they don't throw the ball. Their issue is they throw too many interceptions. They're still going to toss the ball down the field. They're still going to rack up yards, and that's all DK Metcalf needs to win this bet. So DK Metcalf over 950.5 receiving yards. Buccaneers, we're going back with another player prop. We're going to go Baker Mayfield over 3,500.5 passing yards. Another bad line set by FanDuel. This one's 100 yards lower than any other sports book I could find. Baker Mayfield threw for 4,044 yards last season. That's 544 more yards than his set total for this year. So sports books are either expecting he doesn't stay healthy or he takes a huge step back this season. I think, if anything, he takes a step forward. That last year was his first year in the Bucs offense. He's now had a full year of experience with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And obviously the Buccaneers, have plenty of weapons. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Who's their tight end who kind of exploded there late in the season? Cade Otton? Did I get that right? I still got it, baby. Cade Otton kind of exploded late in the year as a viable tight end target for them as well. 3,500.5 passing yards is a pretty modest number, I think, for Baker Mayfield this season. So I will take the over on that. Moving on, we got the Titans. I said earlier that I'm betting on, some over win totals on some shitty teams, and that's how we're going to finish this episode, because I'm going to go Titans over 6.5 wins. Titans over 6.5 wins plus 118. I actually think there's an argument to be made. I don't know if I'm making the argument, but there could be an argument to be made that the Titans had the best offseason amongst all 32 NFL teams. Now, I don't love that they got rid of Mike Vrabel, because I actually like Mike Vrabel a lot. I think he's an elite head coach. I see where maybe it's like, okay, like we've run the course with Mike Vrabel. We just need a change, which, that makes sense. Sometimes that's the case in the NFL. So we'll see how well their new head coach is. I am blanking on their new head coach. Their new head coach, I believe, was the offensive coordinator of the Bengals, right? Mike McDonald's the Seahawks guy. Brian Callahan. Yes, offensive coordinator for the Bengals. Who knows how good he's going to be? But they made a lot of great signings. Signed Calvin Ridley at receiver. Signed Lloyd Cushenberry to improve their offensive line. Which is a big signing for them. Kenneth Murray, Chidobe Awuzie, on defense. Traded for L'Jarius Sneed. A lot of good moves by the Titans this offseason. I think they're going to improve. I think Will Levis might take a little bit of a step forward. Hand up, I watched his sex tape. Sorry. I guess it wasn't a sex tape. It's a blowjob tape. I watched it. Not proud of it. I watched it. Listen, if you're going to tell me there's footage out there of a quarterback in the NFL, a sex tape, what am I going to do? Not watch it? I watched it. Not proud of it. I watched it. Good for him. I wish him well. I think he's going to take a step forward on the football field this year. Not proud of it, guys. Come on. Admit it. You watched it too. You guys watched it too. Don't get mad at me. You guys watched it. I think they reached 7 wins. Once again, with these bad teams, we're not asking a lot. 7-10 is all we need from the Tennessee Titans. We'll see if they can get it done. And that leads me to my final pick for the show, for the episode. And it's, same narrative here. A bad team to go over their short win total. I'll go over 6.5 wins for the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels obviously isn't going into as good of a situation as Caleb Williams is, but if you were to ask me who do I think is going to have a more successful career, I actually think Jaden Daniels. I don't know why. They also do have some offensive weapons, though. I mean, Austin Eckler, running back, he's getting up there, but he's still very good. He's going to be a very good security blanket for Jaden Daniels. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson is one of the most underrated wide receiver duos in the NFL. They made actually some very good, solid defensive signings as well. Dante Fowler, Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, one of the more underrated defensive backs in the NFL. They also have the 13th easiest schedule. I think they finished third in the NFC East. I think they're a better team than the Giants. I think they go over 6.5 wins. I'll take 7 wins. I'll take 8 wins. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they will be, I think, better than their win total indicates at 6.5. So I wouldn't say I'm high on the Commanders. I'm higher on the Commanders than the market is how I'd say that. So give me the Commanders over 6.5 wins to wrap things up. I'm not going to go through and recap. 32 picks is too many picks for me to recap. Scroll through. I'll put the timestamps in the description. Scroll through if you want to, get a recap of my pick for your favorite team or whatever team you're interested in. But this has been the episode. I think this is going to be like an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes long. So there you go. So reminder, sign up for my Survivor League, the official Bacon Bets podcast Survivor League. $25 buy-in. Only 300 entries allowed. You can enter up to 3. I'm keeping it pretty short. I guess if it fills up quick, I can always open up a second one. But for right now, 300 entries into the Survivor League. Grand prize is $6,750. Splashsports.com/baconbets. Splashsports.com/baconbets. Link is in the description if you're listening to this on audio or on YouTube. The link is in the description. And that's it for me, my friends. The Bacon Bets podcast is back, but now I'm going to be off again. I'm taking one more final vacation to Canada starting this coming week. I'll be back on the 22nd, and then I'll be getting my notes together for week 1. I do not know when my week 1 episode of Road to 272 will be released. Could be as early as the last week of August. Will likely be, the Monday of opening week. But that's the next time you'll hear from me. So keep an eye out for that. Football's here, baby. The Hall of Fame game's done. Football season's here. Get ready. Get excited. Load up your accounts and your sports books. Play some futures bets. Best of luck. Gamble or bless. I'll talk to you next time I talk to you. It'll be week 1 of the 2024 edition of Road to 272 bets. Get excited, my friends. Gamble or bless. I'll talk to you next time.